Yeah. I love my. Oh, here we go. 9:30. All right. Good morning, everybody. I think we're good to go. Okay, we're good to go. Can't quite see Joy over at the sound system. It's starting things up, so we guesswork. We're in the friendship room. We're able to kind of sit down a little bit and have a bit more relaxed Sunday school. And my knee is grateful because I won't be limping around for an hour and 10 minutes. So I think I just saying to the Sunday school class. I don't know what I did with my sheet of from Habakkuk. It's not in my Bible. It's not on my desk. It's not anywhere. I don't know what I did. I did something smart with it. It's Sunday, but it was Easter Sunday, and it was a long, long day, and I was very tired and most of the afternoon. I don't remember. So yeah, but I think we had gotten to the last chapter and and the last few verses of Habakkuk. So I just would like to read those over again, and then we can talk about them, and then we're going to get into Zephaniah. I went a little too far. There we go. All right, so let's take a peek from verses 17 and following, because I don't believe that we finished up everything. Um, so though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food. The flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. To the choir master with stringed instruments. So let's talk about those last few verses. What strikes you about them? How would you describe Habakkuk's attitude? You're going to be hungry. All right. And what's he going to do about it? Well, God could do that. Yeah. But he's still going to rejoice. Isn't that something? Right. And if you think remember the context of Habakkuk, that God is going to send judgment. And so here's Habakkuk, whom I think we can make a really solid case for is a righteous man. Even being a righteous man, as God sends judgment on the nation of Israel in the form of an invasion, it's not like it's going to go around Habakkuk, right? It's not like Habakkuk's farm would be untouched. Habakkuk's animals would be untouched, etc. Habakkuk is expecting that when the disaster falls upon God's people, it's going to fall upon me as well. That though I may not share in my people's guilt, a part um, a part of the um, judgment upon the guilty is that they are also guilty for the judgment falling upon those who are not guilty. Does that make sense? Right? Like um, it's like with a drunk driver, right? The family that is going down the road that gets hit by the drunk driver is not guilty of doing anything wrong. Yet the repercussions of the drunk driver's decision falls upon that family and their extended family and their friends, and that's why it's such a um, um, highly punished crime. Like there's, I like to watch like Lone Star Law, Northwoods Law, or whatever, and here are these wardens. They find somebody who's drunk driving, and it's not like, well, don't do it again. Get yourself home safely. Nope, they're arrested on the spot, on every time, on the spot, just like that. If you have somebody sober in the car and you're driving, you're arrested on the spot, and the other person can take your vehicle home. It's such a serious crime, and that's sort of the way that Habakkuk understands how this is going to work. The punishment's going to fall on me. Jan.
Two comments, one on either side of it.
Yeah.
One, I was reading in Daniel this morning, and God's punishment on Israel
Mm-hmm.
did not exclude Daniel.
Right.
He was among the first of the captives that were taken away.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The other, I kind of hesitate to suggest, but not totally. I know you don't like to spend a lot of time talking about end times,
Mm-hmm.
but it is for this very reason that I cannot hold with the rapture taking all of the believers out of the way before the tribulation happens.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. And I like to say that I like to keep a loose grip on my eschatology. So your eschatology is your understanding of the end times and heaven and all that. And I agree with you, Janice, that because God's people have never there is no example um, besides perhaps the Exodus um, where judgment falls upon the unrighteous that the righteous also don't get caught under it, right? And Daniel's a great example. So therefore, I agree that it seems inconsistent, with the exception of the example of the Exodus, that the rapture would come before trouble falls upon the earth. Um, Maybe halfway through, maybe afterward. Uh, I don't know. I don't worry about it. It's God's problem. And kind of like Habakkuk says here, right? Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the trees, the produce of the olives not work out, the cattle in the field nothing work. I might not be happy with those things, but still I will rejoice in the Lord. Right? That's got to be that has to be our response as God's people. Otherwise, there's not trust in the Lord. There's not hope, right? Like we talked last week. I'll review. We talked about that 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. About hope. Paul closes up that section in Romans 22, 23 in that ballpark, talking about hope. Hope that is seen is not hope, right? That's when if we see our hope, if we see the result, then we've received it, and it's foolish to hope in it because now we possess it, right? Um, so, uh, so yeah, and I think Daniel's a great example. The Not only is Daniel carted away from his likely very comfortable life because it's apparent that he's somehow attached to royalty, um, and carted away into captivity as a child. Um, but the Babylonians were known for castrating their male servants so that they'd be safe to have around the women in court. So the likelihood that Daniel is a eunuch is very high. It's not certain, but it's very high. So he's not just carted off into slavery, but he's mangled and then forced to live with that. And how does he do it? He does it faithfully to the Lord. Yeah, exactly. Yes, absolutely. Yep. So, what do you think? How he ends it? The last verse to the choir, last portion of a verse to the choir master with stringed instruments. Yeah, it's a song. We did talk about it. I was I was so tired last week. I have barely any recollection of the whole day. um, yeah, so I think it's amazing. It's not just a song; it's a song for worship, and it's not just a song for worship; it's a song for worship in the temple, because that's who the choir master, where the choir master is.
Which also says that our worship should include judgment on sin,
Mm-hmm.
and it also should allow for the deepest of negative grieving emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Because so often we come to church, well, example, the second church, when they decided to get rid of me, one of the members said to me, when we come to church on Sunday, we want to feel good when we leave.
Yeah. Yep.
And you don't let us.
Yeah. That sense that worship make me feel good. I ought to walk out feeling like I'm on cloud nine, and your sermons don't make me feel good. Um, that's not the kind of church I want to go to, sort of thing. And like some of the songs we've picked to do with the worship team reflect life isn't great, right? Like I really love the Valley song when we decided to pick up the Valley song and do that, because the song is about life is hard, and though life is hard, I will sing hallelujah. Right now, hallelujah is Hebrew. It's a Hebrew word, and it means praise the Lord. It's exactly Ale is to praise, and the Yah at the end is Yahweh. Hallelujah.
That's important because sometimes our is so deep, we can't come up with the words.
Oh, get ready for the sermon today. Yeah.
Scripture,
Mm-hmm.
songs,
Yep.
to say what we
Mm-hmm.
haven't been able to say yet.
Yeah.
It takes a long time when you're going through pain that deep. It takes a long time to be able to talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you see Habakkuk here talking about the physical circumstances of my life may go to absolute garbage, right? I'm going to rejoice in the Lord. And then look how he says, he makes my feet like the deer's, he makes me tread on high places, right? Like he gives me the mountain view. That's pretty cool.
That last verse, like how God enables him to rejoice.
Mm,
Because that rejoicing is the decision that he's making
yeah.
despite the difficulty. But it's not him that's doing that work of rejoicing. It's God giving him the ability to do that. To call, like when I hear that he makes my feet like the feet of a deer, it's like light
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh
easy,
yeah.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
going, it's like there's a lightness to that. And all the rest of this is not light.
Yeah.
But somehow in the midst of all of that, God enables him to
Mm.
feel that lightness.
Yeah. That
And so
lightness,
he can
that
rejoice.
yeah, God will provide him with that lightness, that ease to navigate these high places and see. Like when you're in the high place, you get the better view, right? When you're down there watching your trees not have fruit, you're in the low view. You get up on the mountains, you have the better view. And you're right. The ease at which a deer will leave when it's ready to go is ridiculous to watch. And a hilarious event a number of years ago. I took Griffin on a trail run in the St. Albans forest, and there was nobody else there, and he always just stuck right by my side when I ran. So I didn't really worry about it. Let him off leash. I carried the leash in my hand, and we were running and running, and we got to this one spot, and there was a big long gully and then a ridge, and there was a deer on top of the ridge, just standing there looking at us. And Griffin stopped and he looked at it and he was like, "That's my new best friend." And so he bolted as fast as he could. I never seen him run so fast. I want to go play with this funny dog. Choom, right. He's going down the hill into the gully, and the deer just kind of goes, boop, and it's gone. Just gone with the ease, just hop and it's gone. And I just stood there laughing and laughing, like, Griff, you have no hope. What are you gonna do? It took 3 calls, but he turned around and came back. But it was mostly I was just laughing and laughing. Like, you're not gonna catch that deer. He's gone. That deer is on the high places. Peacing out. So, the last thing I just want to say or ask is, as we've read through Habakkuk, um, how has Habakkuk struck us or influenced our understanding of how God may speak to us?
mentioned last week, I love the way Habakkuk in particular is conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he talks to God, God talks back.
Yeah.
God, God talks back.
Yep. I remember you saying that now.
Yeah.
That's coming back to me. Okay. So this is a lot of review. I so yes, that conversation, the back and forth
Yeah.
is really cool.
And we don't expect it to,
No. Mm-hmm.
which sometimes I wonder if that's why we don't pick up on the conversational
Mm-hmm.
speaking of God with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Habakkuk also complains to the Lord.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, how long, oh Lord, must
Mm-hmm.
I call for help, but you do not listen?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Habakkuk
I do
complains.
that to God, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, how long
Mm-hmm.
do I have to, how long is this going to last?
Mm-hmm.
And God doesn't, I guess he answers him, he talks to him. It's not the answer he wants, but at the same time, I don't think that God reprimands him.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of that is like, I think you're right that God answers him and doesn't reprimand him for complaining, because I think, as you look at Habakkuk with his complaints are not um, kind of, stating that God has failed. He's he's like, when are you gonna do it? Like, I know that you are just. I know that you are right. When will you bring the justice?
I agree with Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
God doesn't reprimand Habakkuk for asking questions, but at the same time, he doesn't coddle him.
Oh no, he does not.
He doesn't say, there, Habakkuk, it's going to be all right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He just says, I am who I am, I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Yep. Yep. He doesn't. And I think that's neat too, that he doesn't treat Habakkuk like he's a little boy. Um, that he treats him like he's talking to a man and like he's talking to an adult. Here's how it's going to go. You're not going to like it, but here's how it's going to be. Mhm. Any other comments? All right. Well, we can turn the page or look across the page or whatever you need to do to get into Zephaniah. All right. So I have a little introduction for us about Zephaniah, a very short introduction as compared to the one from Habakkuk. Um, Zephaniah prophesied during the reign of King Josiah. Like Jeremiah, he prophesied during a time of religious and social reform that we might even call revival. He focuses on God's judgment against corruption and wickedness among his people. He speaks of the day of Yahweh and the preservation of a remnant. Something neat to remember about Josiah. Josiah was very young when he became king. He was like 8 years old. He calls for a um, uh, oh boy, I'm losing words today. A renovation of the temple. And during the renovating of the temple, they find the scroll of the law. It's probably Deuteronomy. People tend to think probably Deuteronomy. And so he's like, well, let's hear it. And he's like a teenager. He's like 16, 17 years old, something like that. They come and they read the scroll of the law to him, and he realizes that God's people have been faithless to um, the Lord. And so he throws himself upon God's mercy, calls for a reform, calls for a revival, calls for sacrifices and repentance and all this kind of thing. And once he gets he gets rid of, not only does he stop the pagan idolatrous worship in Judah, he also stops the worship on the high places. So one of the things that is, it's like the people would go and do their own worship of the Lord. They would not do the worship that God had called for in the temple. They just go and make sacrifices on their own for their families or whatever on the high places, tops of hills around their communities or whatever. Which is not so dissimilar from when like Nadab and Abihu offer strange fire to the Lord, right? And the Lord comes out of the fire and kills the two sons of Aaron for trying to usurp their father's place as high priest. But God does not bring that kind of judgment upon the people immediately for worshiping on the high places. But there are a couple of kings. One of them is Josiah, the other is his great grandfather, Hezekiah, that stopped the worship on the high places. And then the thing that Josiah does in addition to that is once he gets the reform done in Judah, he turns his eyes north and goes into Israel, basically retaking the northern kingdom, and kills pagan priests, kills the priests that are worshiping God in the form of the two bulls, one at the north and one at the south. He and brings reform to Israel as well. And then when he's about 37 years old, the king of, or Pharaoh, wants to go to war against the king of Babylon, Assyria, and wants to walk through Israel. He won't let him. And they get into combat, and Josiah is killed, probably in pride as a young man, you know. So um, I want us to think for a moment. It's like, so I said, consider for a moment that two of the prophets we have studied, plus Huldah, I don't want to miss out on Huldah. You're welcome. They prophesied during the reign of Josiah. Likewise, three of the writing prophets, Amos, Micah, Amos, Micah, and Isaiah, during the reign of Hezekiah. So what do you think is going on? Right here we have these two times of great religious reform, and yet there are prophets prophesying about corruption and wickedness among God's people. So what does that tell us? Okay, so the law, quote unquote, said one thing, but it doesn't mean people's hearts were right. Okay, Lisa?
When Christians, whether individual or group, are growing in their faith, growing closer to God,
Mm-hmm.
then the devil has to work harder.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So when God's people are growing closer to the Lord, the devil works harder, brings about perhaps more temptation, incites more evil. Okay.
Very similar. I'm thinking when there is revival, lots of people want to get on the bandwagon because
Mm-hmm.
their hearts are not revived.
Yeah, pretty similar. I think pretty similar to what Sandy said. Yeah. That when there's revival, people want to get on the bandwagon. I think our country went through a long period of that, where Christianity was the social thing to do. Um, and you'd be questioned by your neighbors why you didn't go to church on a Sunday morning, in a good portion of our country. Um, okay, God could be sending the prophet to speak, knowing as preparation for the future. God knows what's going to happen at the end of Josiah's reign. Right, the end of Josiah's reign, the next few years are a mess, absolute mess. His sons, I think one of his sons takes the throne, and he gets killed. One of his brothers is put on the throne. I think he gets killed, and I can't remember the order anymore, but it's a mess. There are three kings after him in fairly rapid succession. Anybody else? I think it's good for us to remember that, in very much in line with what you guys are saying, that just because things appear one way to us does not mean that that's the truth, as God is, from God's perspective. All right, let's look at Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 1. I'm going to find out who this guy's. Oh, what's that, Sandy?
It might be that because of the revival that's happening, that people are at a point where they might actually be ready.
Okay, that's really good too. So it could be that with the revival happening, it's a place where the people are at a point where they might listen to the Lord. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, let's look at 1:1. The word of the Lord that came to Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, son of Gedaliah, son of Amariah, son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah. So, Josiah is King Hezekiah's great grandson. So then who is Zephaniah to Josiah? We need a family tree. We did a little bit of a family tree, but Josiah is the son of Ammon, the son of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah. So he's Hezekiah's grandson, great grandson. Josiah is. So then looking at Zephaniah's family tree, what are we seeing?
He's also related to Hezekiah.
He's also related to Hezekiah. Yeah. So it looks like he's Hezekiah's Cushi son, grandson, great grandson. He's one more generation removed.
My first thought was, Zephaniah is an old man to Josiah.
He could be, but he's one more generation. So he's actually potentially younger than Josiah. But he's one more generation. He might not be, but potential. But he could be right about the same age. I think if my understanding is correct, he's first cousin once removed. So he's the.
But if that's like that many grandchildren down, it would be more like third cousin.
All right. This is my point. If I'm correct, it wasn't a point to like argue which kind of cousin is it. It's just he's, as Brock had said, he's his cousin. Right? They share Hezekiah as a great or great grandparent, which is pretty significant. Don't you think? I was like, check that out. This guy's in the royal family. I mean, he's quite a distance out to take the throne, but he's got a great grandfather that was king, and not just any king, but one of the righteous, the like good kings. Remember how I've talked about there were bad kings, worse kings, and good kings, right? It really weren't like good kings and very good kings, kind of thing. So Hezekiah is one of the good ones. Zephaniah is kind of his cousin to Josiah, one way or another. All right, so I thought that that's important to establish that he's not out from the fields, right? He's not a village guy. He's probably in Jerusalem, likely. He's in the royal family, likely educated, and would know to some degree the workings of the court, what's going on behind the scenes, right? So let's take a peek and see what kinds of stuff God says through him. Let's look at verses 2 through 6. I will utterly sweep away everything from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. I will sweep away man and beast. I will sweep away the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea and the rubble with the wicked. I will cut off mankind from the face of the earth, declares the Lord. I will stretch out my hand against Judah and against the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and I will cut off from this place the remnant of Baal and the name of the idolatrous priests along with the priests, those who bow down on the roofs to the host of the heavens, those who bow down and swear to the Lord and yet swear by Milcom, those who have turned back from following the Lord, who do not seek the Lord or inquire of him. So, what's interesting about these opening verses?
Well, to tie it with what we were just talking about,
Mhm.
in the face of the revival is still naming particular sins.
Hmm.
Sins of idolatry, especially.
Yep. Yep. So in the face of that, and we don't know when in Josiah's reign this prophecy comes. This could be Josiah could be 11 years old and have no idea, right, about the Lord at this point, or it could be after his revival. Can't be sure. Um, but yeah, God is naming very specific sins. Um, Specific enough, honestly, if I look at verse 5, um, I tend to lean towards this being after the revival. You see that verse 5? Those who bow down on the roofs to the host of heavens, um, and those who bow down and swear to the Lord and yet swear by Milcom. So my tendency is to think in that situation. Now, there are two possibilities. One could be a person who swears to the Lord and then also at a subsequent time goes and tries to cover his bases by swearing to Milcom, right? I've met people, even in our modern era, who will belong to a couple of different churches. I've known people that, not here in St. Albans, but they go to one church for their early service and then they go to another one. So they're then you ask them why, and they're like, "Well, I'm covering my bases. Just in case the Baptists don't have it right, I'm also going to the Pentecostal church," kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, insurance, right? So it could be, somebody's got they're trying to get insurance, right? They're making their oaths to the Lord, but then if the Lord can't follow through, we've got Milcom. We're backing up with the god Milcom. I lean, however, towards a person who appears to be worshiping the Lord, but is actually worshiping Milcom. Because it seems like there is in verses 4 and 5, um, you have this sense of hidden or remnant idolatry going on. Does that make sense?
So are you subsuming the guys in verse 5 under the remnants of God? Those who
Yeah, it easily could be parallel, but I think Milcom's a separate god from Baal. Yeah.
myself, I would say the remnants of God, that's a third category.
Well, yes, but um, broadly,
Yeah.
the idolatrous worship is continuing in the land, but probably in secret.
And verse 6
Hmm.
could be yet another category, or it could be a summary of this one's.
Right. Yeah. Hmm. Check out uh, how does God describe the actions that He's going to take? Verses 2 through 6. Specific, or like maybe 2 through 4. Sweep, yeah, sweep them away. Yep, cut. Yep, cut off. And then stretch out my hand against. Those are all powerful words of judgment. Um, that sweep away. Really, just I'm done. Like I don't know if you want to picture a person with a broom or somebody who's just had it and they're sweeping off a table with their arm. Yeah. Clear the table kind of thing. I don't, either way, like big violent action. Um, yeah, utterly not what you want to be on the receiving end of, right? No way. I'm all set. Um, I can think of, it says the stretch out my hand. I often picture that with a smack, right? That and the hand just being outstretched, that super violent action. And against whom? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, remnant of Baal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Idolatrous priests. Yep. And then see how and it says that, and the name of the idolatrous priests along with the priests, those who bow down on the roofs. That this sense that that's why I get this sense that there's this hidden worship of Baal. It's even among the priesthood. Look even earlier, um, everything from the face of the earth, man and beast, birds, fish, the rubble with the wicked, cut off mankind. This is so I get a sense this is one of those already not yet sort of when God brings his judgment upon Jerusalem, Judah, for their idolatry and failure to worship him, that's part of this, but it's also looking forward to the coming judgment of the Lord upon the whole earth.
So if we, at the end of verse 4,
Mm-hmm.
and the name of the idolatrous priests along with the priests.
Yes.
Would that be the legitimate priests
Um,
taught
I,
correctly?
so I would again lean. It's possible it could be priests that have not taught correctly, but again, I would lean towards. Not only would you have idolatrous priests who are worshiping Baal, but among the Levites themselves, you would have those who were hedging their bets and worshiping not only Yahweh, leading in worship of Yahweh, but leading in worship of these false gods. That would be my leaning. And we can look around today and see where there are those that claim worship of the Lord and yet teach things that are also contrary. Um, so let's mosey on to verses 7 through 16. We're going to see. We're going to ask ourselves, what does God tell the people to do and why? Be silent before the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is near. The Lord has prepared a sacrifice and consecrated his guests. And on the day of the Lord's sacrifice, I will punish the officials and the king's sons, and all who array themselves in foreign attire. On that day, I will punish everyone who leaps over the threshold and those who fill their master's house with violence and fraud. On that day, declares the Lord, a cry will be heard from the fish gate, a wail from the second quarter, a loud crash from the hills. Wail, O inhabitants of the mortar, for all the traders are no more. All who weigh out silver are cut off. At that time, I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and I will punish the men who are complacent, those who say in their hearts, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do ill. Their gods shall be plundered, and their houses laid to waste. Though they build houses, they shall not inhabit them. Though they plant vineyards, they shall not drink wine from them. The great day of the Lord is near and hastening fast. The sound of the day of the Lord is bitter. The mighty man cries aloud there. A day of wrath is that day, a day of distress and anguish, a day of ruin and devastation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of trumpet blast and battle cry against the fortified cities and against the lofty battlements. So, what does God tell the people to do and why?
Silent.
Be silent.
And I'm connecting that with the verse in Habakkuk, which is 2:20.
Mm-hmm.
But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him.
Mm.
silence before the worst of the judgments begin
Yeah.
to be poured out.
Yeah.
So that the silence is not just be quiet, it's dread, awe, speechlessness,
Mm-hmm.
The command not to object to what God is going to do in his wrath and his judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Just be quiet and watch.
Yep. Yeah, so Janice is making a couple connections in Habakkuk and also in the book of Revelation, where God has said, keep silent, either keep silent or like there is silence in heaven. Um, and it's not and it's like a time of dread, um, and maybe even a command to not speak,
Waiting for the worst of the judgment.
waiting for the worst of the judgment. Anybody ever been chastising your children and they try to object? Yeah, but mom, but dad, and you just say, be quiet. Don't say a word. Right? What is the first one of the things that the police officer says to somebody when they're arresting them? The right to remain silent. Why? Anything you say can be can and will, I think it's a can and will be used against you in a court of law, right? Keep your mouth shut. That's like advice, right? Like, you don't want to talk now. I'm helping you, right? um, so check. God has just levered levied a whole bunch of statements of judgment against the people, right? I'm going to sweep you away. I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to extend my arm because of this idolatry that's going on. And you can almost picture, we were just talking about God, a back and forth conversation, right? The people going, oh, but wait, Lord, it's not as bad as it used to be, right? Or no, Lord, I'm changing. I'm starting tomorrow. I'm doing something different, right? Like no, and God just saying, be silent. You're making it worse for yourself, Jan.
Also, for me, connecting to our Tuesday study, Behold Your God,
Mm-hmm.
Thinking God Biblically, because the lesson we're coming up to very shortly is removing the idols from our hearts.
Mm.
And his point is that we have many idols in our own hearts, and we don't even recognize that they are idols.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, God deals very graciously with us in regards to the idols that we hold in our hearts, whether we acknowledge what they are or we don't. But if God is going to call us to account, it's time to keep the mouth closed. Like, don't open your mouth. Let God say what He's going to say. So, what do you think about this? Let's. So, why does He tell the? Why else? Why is He telling the people to stay silent? He's explaining what He's going to do. Mm-hmm. I think to keep people from being more guilty.
Also says the Lord has prepared a sacrifice and has consecrated those he's invited.
We're going to get to that. That's a question at the bottom of the page. No, it's okay. You're good. You're good. You're good. I'm glad you. No, I'm glad. No, it's good, right? Okay, so we're gonna get to that sacrifice in a minute. That's pretty. This is. I think this is pretty cool. We're gonna check it out. All right. So, how many times does God use the word day in those 9 verses? 11 times. Joy's been on it. All right. Brock counts 9. Yeah. 1, 2. 3. I have 11. Yep. 11 times. Why? Okay. Yeah. When you say something multiple times, you're trying to make a point. Mm-hmm. What kinds of things does he say about the day? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wrath, distress.
That day I will punish, on that day a cry will go up.
Mm-hmm. Punishment, a cry will go up. Day of darkness.
On the day the Lord is near,
Mm-hmm.
day of distress.
Mm. It's going to be a bad day. If you're on the receiving end, it's going to be a bad day, right? Bad day. I want to just point out one little thing. It's not in the notes, but if you look at verse 7, does your verse 7 say Lord God? Depending on the translation you're using. ESV does. Sovereign, yours says sovereign Lord. Okay. NIV says sovereign Lord. So ESV says Lord God with God all in caps with lowercase od. Um, I'm not sure how NIV writes it out. Just says probably sovereign than Lord, like you would expect. Lord's all in caps, right?
ORD.
Yeah. 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 So that's behind that is the word Yahweh, the name of God Yahweh. The ESV is struggling with what to do because typically they would use the word Lord, but the word Lord is already there, right? That's why NIV makes the jump to sovereign Lord, right? That sense that it's the word Lord is there to speak about God's sovereignty, that God is in control. But then the ESV is struggling because normally they'd say Lord for Yahweh, right? Because we've fallen into the same tradition that the Jews had to not pronounce the name of God. So you could make the leap here and you could say the Lord Yahweh in this passage. Jan, you've got something to say?
Just that the one that's not on caps
Mm-hmm.
would be the translation of Adonai.
Adonai, right.
So it's
Mm.
Adonai Yahweh.
Right. Yeah, which is Lord.
Master.
Yeah. Master. Yep. Mm-hmm. Speaking of, so that's God's sovereignty tied in right there. All right, let's get to the place that Lisa was all excited about. All right, so it says that the Lord is preparing a sacrifice. Why? What is the sacrifice? Yes, you may.
The rest of your question says, what is God's treasured possession?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where you came up with the term treasured possession.
I did not come up with the term treasured possession from this passage.
Okay, that's what.
So let's start backwards. What is the Lord's treasured possession? His people. What is the sacrifice God is making? His people. Why? Mm-hmm. Yeah. A sacrifice has to cost you. A sacrifice has to cost you. Right? When a man sinned and went to bring a sacrifice, he didn't look through his herd for his three-legged bull, right? He didn't look for the heifer that had, that was like a conjoined twin. He took one that was perfect to the eyes. It was unblemished to bring as an offering to the Lord. And it didn't matter even if it wasn't a sin offering, if it was a fellowship offering, if it was a thank offering, it was brought. It was not. It wasn't a junk animal. That you read this passage, and you're like, well, what's the sacrifice? He goes into talking about how he's going to punish his people, and I think we can easily get caught up, especially reading as we've been reading in the prophets about God bringing disaster upon his people. If we're not careful, we can slide into that. The God of the Old Testament is an angry God, and the God of the New Testament is a God of love and grace. And I think if I'm understanding this correctly right here, God is saying the bringing of just judgment upon my people is going to cost me. It is going to hurt. Though they deserve it, and though God can do nothing outside of his will, right, which we've talked about, God cannot do anything he does not want to do. Bringing the judgment upon his treasured possession grieves him. Imagine instead of us talking about the God of the Old Testament as an angry God or a jealous God. Imagine if we talked about him as a grieving God.
But like you were talking about a little bit before, there will also be casualties, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of who's destroyed and who's killed.
Mm-hmm.
That probably weren't just like doing what was wrong, I guess you'd say, like in this destruction. I mean, even in the beginning, I will sweep away the birds of the air and the fish of the sea.
Mm-hmm.
The birds and the fish haven't been worshiping Baal,
Okay.
but like they're like they're like you were saying before, part of that punishment.
Okay. So apply that to this
So what I'm
grieving.
saying is, so they're like part of that sacrifice. Like God is not just not just like punishing. Like there isn't just punishment falling on those who truly deserve it, but part of the sacrifice is the fallout of who else is hurt and who else is destroyed in this process of punishment that maybe we're without borders.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah. So part of the fallout of the punishment is those that are not necessarily guilty, right? As we interpret guilt, they get swept away, they get destroyed. But let's come back, and I want us to, before we jump too far into that, what do you think of this idea of God as a grieving God?
I think that's a good image.
Mm-hmm.
I'm horrible at remembering references. I wish I could.
Mm.
But I think there are at least two places in the Old Testament where God says, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked.
Mm. Yep. God taking no pleasure in the death of the wicked. Yeah. He describes himself as a jealous God, right? Now I want you to go out and find me all the jealous people who are happy. Right? I'm not sure that God is happy in the face of not necessarily his jealousy, but what stirs his jealousy is our unfaithfulness.
And that causes him grief.
And that causes him grief. Yeah. And I think that's significant to think about. And here he says, I'm preparing a sacrifice. And he's prepared a sacrifice. He's consecrated his guests. And then he starts talking about the day of the Lord's sacrifice. And then it's punishment. Well, what's he sacrificing? He's sacrificing his love for his people. He's sacrificing his people, his treasured possession. He's not getting rid of his love for his people, but it's his love for them that's going to cause this to be. I made a joke that, the day of the Lord, this sounds like a horrible time if you're on the receiving end. But it's not like God's on the giving end laughing. He's grieving too. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. As a parent, exactly. It um, mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As a parent, you know that young children have to learn, and it does hurt,
Mm-hmm.
but it's part of the process of raising them. But when they're older, independent,
Yeah.
and you feel you must turn them in because they're consistently breaking the law and hurting other people.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Having an adult child that's breaking the law and you have to turn that child in. I think we could probably, call Teen Challenge and they could send us somebody who could talk about how my parents turned me in and it was horrible for them. And it was the best thing they ever did for me. That I can't imagine. So let's mosey on. And what will God do to his people? Like, who does he single out? What's he going to do? What's going on? Starts off kind of halfway through verse 8. Who's he going to start with? What's significant about that? Who's Zephaniah? Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's talking about his family. He's talking about his relatives. And he's talking about, the officials and the king's sons. He's talking about people he's spent his life around, people he interacts with regularly. I will punish the officials and the king's sons and all who array themselves in foreign attire. What's up with that?
You said it was the punishment begins with his own family. But the way I read it, also, I have to say the punishment begins with the government officials.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Perhaps foreign attire refers to making alliances with foreign nations that God did not command, because I know that in part of the history of Israel, those alliances, they in the sin of unbelief that God would be enough for them to win the battle.
Mm-hmm.
They made alliances with pagan nations,
Yep.
thinking they needed their help in order to overcome the situation.
Yeah, one of the commands God has to his people when he gives them the law is that they're not to make any alliances with foreign nations, because all those alliances, you can't make an alliance with a foreign nation without making an alliance with their God, right? So you can't have a covenant with a foreign nation under Yahweh alone. You have to have a covenant as well under whomever their God is. So God, in part, doesn't want them making alliances with foreign nations because that involves idolatrous worship, but also because of the sin of not trusting God to protect their borders, to protect their armies, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so here's something as I was reading this passage that hit me, and this is something that hit me. It hit me quite a while ago. Um, all around the world, all around the world, every culture you have, people dress differently, right? Except when they are trying to have a degree of legitimacy with a foreign nation, right? So if you go to the Middle East, everybody dresses, and I'm not sure what they call them, the robes and et cetera, because it's cooler, until they're going to go have a meeting. Almost not all the time, but very often they're going to have a meeting with a Western power. Then all of a sudden they're wearing a suit, right? And our guy is going over with some kind of hat or piece of cloth or something that reflects their culture. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but God had told the people of Israel how they were to dress, what they were to wear, how they were to cut and not cut their hair and their beards and etc., so that they stood before him as separate before him. I think the charge is here, your kings and your officials are trying to dress like somebody they're not in order to impress somebody that's not me. So instead of being faithful to me, you're dressing like you're an Assyrian, or you're dressing like you're a Babylonian, or you're dressing like you're an Egyptian when you go before them. You don't need to. You stand before me. You don't stand before them. I think it's kind of interesting to see, just kind of like how I saw that. I see that reflected around our world. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Whom else is he bringing judgment upon?
Merchants in the market.
Yeah, merchants in the marketplace. Mm-hmm.
Everyone who leaps over the threshold.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that's some kind of a pagan ceremony.
I was a little stumped with that one as well, but I if I look at it with parallelism, if I'm thinking parallelism, um, that it says, and all who fill their master's house with violence and fraud, that the leaping over the threshold may be people who steal into others' homes, um, and take their stuff, um, or I mean, I'm not certain. I didn't take time to look that up. It just seemed to strike me as burglary or something.
Mine. Oh, I do too. What's yours?
It says this verse perhaps refers to a practice associated with the Philistine god Dagon, or to a superstitious belief that demons lived at the entrance of a house. In either case, the practice illustrates the pagan thinking of some of us.
Okay, so it could be like a step on a crack, break your mother's back,
Yeah, like
that kind of thing, right?
yeah.
Yeah, superstition. So you.
Mine gives a reference.
Oh, cool.
It says see 1 Samuel 5:5.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
mine said too.
First Samuel 5:5 says what?
That is why to this day neither the priests of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold.
Oh, okay. So references First Samuel 5:5, where the priests of Dagon don't step on the threshold; they step over it. So it could be a reference to something like that. Yep. Foolish superstitions.
So that would actually make two categories of people worse than
Yep, it would. Yep. Yep. So it would be those with, I'll call it just foolish superstitions, as well as those who unrighteous gain, fill their master's house with violence and fraud. Mm-hmm.
Perjury. It's what do you bring?
Extortion, etc. Yep. It's almost like gangland enforcers. The guys that go around to get the insurance money, kind of thing, and bring it in. Yep. Um, and how is the day described? And you can go to 15 and 16, but you can also look at verses 10, um, 11, 12, 13.
Filled with people crying out in pain and anguish.
Mm-hmm.
Waiting.
Wailing, pain, anguish. Yep.
The cry will be bitter.
The cry will be bitter. Look at verse 12. At that time, I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and I will punish the men who are complacent. Those who say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do ill.
Deists.
Yeah, deists. Yeah, yeah, people who believe that there is a God, but he's somewhat powerless, or he's sitting back and watching. Yeah. Yep. Most, not much. Many of the founding fathers were deists. Yeah. Um, yeah, I can't remember right now the difference between a deist and a theist, but I know that there were those kinds of things. Um, believed that there was a God. Um, they might have believed that it was basically the God of the Bible, but misunderstood who the God of the Bible is. Um, yep. And it's 10:37, so why don't we call it quits right there? And we'll pick up at verses 17 to 18 next week. Zephaniah. Probably a book in the Bible where most of us haven't spent a lot of time again. Neat to see what's here. All right, let me close this in a word of prayer. Father, thank you so very much for today and for this great time for us to get together and spend time in your word. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you that your word speaks truth. Thank you that your word speaks to us. And thank you, God, that it is your word. We bless you today in Jesus' great name. Amen.